back to 30 Days to Building a Marriage You Love. I'm Danielle.
I'm Chris.
And guys, we're here for tip 24. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, we're tackling a tough one today, which is intimacy. And when we're talking about intimacy, there's really multiple layers to that, I think. So
yeah,
what comes to mind for you when we touch on the subject of intimacy?
I think obviously there's the physical intimacy, the emotional intimacy that we've been talking about, really, I think up throughout these last 23 videos. And then there's the other intimacy that you actually brought up, which is intimacy with God.
Yeah.
So we've, I feel like, had marriage of intimacy, emotional and physical, without God very strongly in our marriage. And we've had the intimacy of physical and emotional and with God. And spoiler alert, it's way better with God.
Yeah. So after our first two children, Danielle and I were talking about, this is actually before one of my deployments, we're talking about, hey, are we gonna plan for a third child or not? And as Danielle and I were talking, I really just wanted to cuddle. Let's just be honest. I wanted to cuddle and talk, and Danielle wanted to be intimate. And then now we have 3 and 4 kids. So this is something that we've had to address previously. But I kid. A couple verses that we want to unpackage and just talk through. Hebrews 13:4. Let marriage be held in honor among all. Let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. I love how it says, let marriage be held in honor among all, because marriage is an incredible honor to take part in. And I think honoring each other through intimacy and the ways that you connect intimately begins with your intimacy with God. Mm-hmm. And I will say that our most intimate times began with really our daily encounters with mm-hmm. God, worship, praying together, and really seeking the Lord. And that breaks down all the physical barriers or the emotional barriers that comes with selfishness that leads to a lot of division when it comes to intimacy in marriage.
Yeah.
And so it submits yourself to the authority of God first, and then it kind of centers you back to, hey, where are we as a couple?
Yeah. So I think to that point too, the daily encounter and just really making a regular habit of getting in the presence of God, it exposes any strongholds, any identities, any hurt, bitterness that you're holding on to that, right? Like so often we want to cling to, and that is what often causes division in marriage. And that emotional intimacy or division in the emotional intimacy feeds into the physical, and it impacts everything. It's kind of like, cancer. It doesn't just stay in one area. And so getting in the presence of God and just surrendering that daily and praying for your spouse, praying for your marriage, praying over your home, and just asking the Lord, God, what are you wanting to do in my heart and my mind? It exposes all of that yuckiness where we get to deal with that. And I say get to, because it is, if we're going to truly live in the fullness and freedom that God has both called us to and designed us for, then that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the other verse?
1 Corinthians 7:1-40. And I won't read the whole 40 verses, but look it up when you get a chance. I'll read a couple verses here, though. Now, concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourself to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control, Danielle. And so there's I joke about that, but there's temptation to be intimate with someone else physically. In marriage, there's also temptation to be intimate with someone else emotionally. And so as you think about it, I mean, you've heard people joke about work wives or work husbands.
Mhm.
We don't ever joke that way. We just don't do it because we don't really think it's funny for multiple reasons. I only have one wife, and she's the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And so why would I want anybody else at work to fill that void
Mm.
that she has? And although it's usually done or said in jest, I think it also opens up a foothold for someone else to come in and fill a void that your wife should be filling.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the ways that we become more intimate as a couple, just in dialogue, is explaining what I do at work, and also her taking interest in what I do at work.
Mhm.
And that's something that when you talk about things with the military, that's takes some explaining to do because it's a totally different language.
Yeah.
But it takes someone else to show genuine interest and help you unpackage it to become
Mhm.
more intimate in an area of your life that's typically kind of held off. And I think some of our friends, some couples, don't even know what their spouse does at work, what position they hold, or what their focus areas are. And that kind of, I think, is sad because you're missing out on a whole significant amount of time during the day to really talk about something.
Yeah.
And although Danielle may not have the same perspective that someone that is in the military does, she brings a different perspective and a different outlook to a situation that may be unique to me, that she can help me unpackage through her own leading of the Holy Spirit, but then also just her own perspective and previous business life.
Yeah, I think, and too, I know a lot of times couples are like, well, I don't want to necessarily bring my work home, or I don't want to involve my spouse. Intimacy is all about vulnerability. When you are just showing up real, raw, like this is me, and whether it's physical or emotional, you are making yourself like fully available to that person. And it is a beautiful thing. It can also be a hard thing. And so all of this stuff, your daily encounter with the Lord, your just investing in your spouse and asking these questions, all of this is essentially effort towards vulnerability, towards intimacy that continues to build. And I think that those are,
Transparency too.
yeah, those
Yeah.
pieces that are so important because you are caring. And one of the things that Chris and I were joking about like earlier, but truly one of the things that he said was that love tanks matter. And so just making sure that you like are filling your spouse's love tank, how we talked about that earlier with the 5 love
There you
languages.
go.
But making sure that you are checking in with your spouse and working to fill their love tank before you just ask to get yours filled all the time.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think we have a tendency to think about ourselves first in those areas.
yeah.
And when you put yourself in the other position, the other person's position and the other person's shoes, you're able to be more sensitive to what they really need in that situation. And it has a positive benefit on the
Mhm.
backside to lead to more intimacy,
Yeah.
emotionally or physically, by focusing on your spouse rather than yourself.
Yeah.
And it's also takes you back to really Colossians, where it talks about serving the other person. So it's super important for intimacy.
Yeah.
So and that leads to one of the other verses, Ephesians 5:3. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among the saints. So impurity can be a number of things, right? And when it comes to taking away from intimacy with your spouse, if you're looking at anything you shouldn't, whether it be pornography, whether it be anything that's any form of pornography, you're diving into something that is going to rip you apart from your spouse. And it's something that is going to create a separation that will absolutely um, affect your ability to be emotionally and physically intimate. And I think on the emotional side too, if you're coveting someone else or the emotional benefits or investment that someone else is giving you, say at work or an old friend, and you're investing in that, and they are feeding that tank that's
Mhm.
deficient in you because your spouse is not feeding it, you are continuing to drift further and further apart.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation and our recommendation for that is to really have an open dialogue with your spouse about what's going on, because that's the best way to create healing, is really transparency and dialogue and
Yeah.
communication to make sure that you can come back together.
Yeah. And I think to that point, to like the open and honest piece of like where you're at, what you're needing, maybe from the other person. And again, this goes back to that honest, the vulnerability of just like, what do you, if we are talking about physical and that's something that you are wanting to grow more in, because y'all, sex married is amazing. And if you're wanting to grow more in that, like be honest with each other, because we've been married lots of years. Sorry.
Sometimes it feels like a
7
lifetime.
7 years together, dating for 8, but married for 7.
The best
And
8 years of my life.
anyway, yeah, mind. But what I'm saying is there is so much good that comes out of just being honest and sometimes just having a conversation, and we just continue to learn about each other. And as years change and bodies change, like it's a good thing to just continue to come back to those conversations. And so the emotional flows into the physical and vice versa. So
what would you say to those out there that maybe use physical intimacy as a weapon?
that's a big no-no. It is. So marriage is all about dying to self. Like if you want to just, like always put you first and always make sure your needs are met and you just want to, be filled all the time, then this is a good checkpoint for you to say, if you are married, be proactive right now and pursue counseling. If you're not married, then be proactive and pursue counseling for yourself if marriage is a desire of yours, because marriage is all about serving the other person and showing up, and both of you guys are serving together. It's not one person is serving, one person's giving 100% of like, I'm always going to serve you, do what you say, do what, like we are accountable to each other, submitted under the authority of the Lord, but submitted in a biblical order too, of he's head of home and I am, like as the Bible talks about, helpmate. And that is a whole different video teaching topic. However, one of the greatest things that you can do is give the enemy, the devil, a win in something that God created so special for marriage, and that is your sex life. And so if the enemy is trying to weave you guys, like spin some lies and maybe create some sense of division, or maybe you're holding on to her or he's holding on to her and you're trying to like harbor that and use that as a weapon, then I cannot encourage you enough. That is a huge no-no, and decide today to be done with it, because nothing will draw you apart greater. Nothing will push your marriage apart farther and even propel maybe one person. And like Chris, that first verse that he talked about, like, or the second verse, but so come back together so that you're not tempted, because we are wired for, like, we are designed to be intimate with each other. We are designed as husbands and wives to come together, and it's a beautiful thing. And so that is one of the other things too, is that you can have this hurt, but even in the sense of trying to have as a weapon, you will create a foothold for the enemy to tempt, and know that the attacks will be intentional. And so that is one of the best things to just in even a victory. And if you're wanting to use it as a weapon, or if you are hurt, is just to say, I'm hurt. I am not in a place physically where I feel like I can show up well to this, and I want to. Even if you don't feel like you want to in that moment, you want to, because you want your marriage to win. You want to love your spouse. You want to grow in your marriage. But that could even be a win. Like, I want to, but I don't feel like, and this is what I need. And can we just talk about this? And you just never know how God can use that. But if you even are having that hurt, like, that is something to heal before and have an encounter with the Lord right then and there. Pray together, turn on worship music, and seek to have healing first. But
yeah, and on the flip side, then, I mean, we are usually more driven on the physical side, and so if you're headed down that route and you know it's the night, like it is on, you know, think about what your wife needs first, because odds are that they probably need something else. And it, like, do you need a back rub tonight? Do you like to rub your shoulders? No.
Sure.
Yeah. So to be to be able to fill that emotional love tank for what she needs.
We knew this was a risky video to do. We were like, can we stay on course? No,
I
like
know. I just want to make
puns,
sure
no
that
jokes.
you don't lose any self-control. I'm just trying to help you in this area. Yeah. Yeah. But I think in our situation, for instance, I know that it's been a long day. I mean, most days with little kids, and one of the best things that I've learned to do through just dialogue for what she needs is, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? It's just a simple question.
A very powerful statement to ask.
And to be able to say that and genuinely mean it with no additional intended
strings attached.
Yeah, strings attached. Thank you. Or sometimes just a hug. Like Dave Ramsey talks about a non-sexual hug, and I'll even say sometimes this is a non-sexual hug. I just want to let you know, because sometimes she just needs a hug, and that's okay. And to be able to sense the more that you're with each other, the more that you're open and communicating clearly with your walls down, guarding against offense, guarding against what you need to try to meet your spouse where she needs, or where he needs in this case. That's one of the most powerful things you can do to serve them well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love it. So to recap, number one, be open and honest about your needs and just kind of how you're feeling, where you're at. Be vulnerable with your spouse. Number two, seek to fill their love language, their love tank before you get yours filled. And number three,
which could really be number one, because this sets the foundation for everything.
Yes.
Your daily encounters.
There you go.
Daily encounters and intimacy with the Lord leads to better intimacy with your spouse.
Yeah.
So let's go do that back rub.
Thanks for joining us.